Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Stephen Hutton. He's an entertainment manager formerly trained in law, which is a bit like having a general contractor who's trained as an architect. He can navigate the ins and outs of record deals, tour obligations, and the things that generally weigh down acts just as they hit the upswing of a promising career. He went to the University of Wisconsin Law School and practiced corporate litigation briefly before starting Uppercut Management, where he guided the careers of Kid Rock, Better Than Ezra, Mario Cataldo, and a slew of other artists, producers, and songwriters. He's the kind of guy whose wisdom you want working for you if you're into production, publishing, A&R, touring, merchandise, and anything that allows an artist to grow a fan base and monetize the craft. He's also Scott Huesing's cousin, so Scott co-hosts this episode with Pete, and they get into all kinds of fun. We're excited to have him. Please enjoy this conversation with our guest today, Stephen Hutton.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick
This
Marotta.
is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Steve Hutton from Possible Management. You're listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yeah, I'm sitting here at Scott's house, Rancho de Huesing, and I finally got to meet Carlos and Walker, which is there's new dogs. And we're sitting here with your cousin Steve. This is cool.
Yeah, this is a family episode of the Break It Down Show because I'm really lucky. My cousin Kelly and my cousin Steve are in town. They're from Chicago, Illinois, North Enders and Edgewater, right?
Yep. North Siders.
Yeah, North Siders. Sorry, man. Yeah, see, God, I've been in California too long.
Yeah, right.
That's a rookie move.
your Midwest card is generally
Oh, man. I can't handle the cold, and I miss Name City sections.
When I moved to Chicago, I used to live in Chicago. You know, I'm from California, so like we talk about the freeway by the number of the freeway, and you guys do not do that. So it's like the Dan Ryan, the this, the that,
right.
and I'm like, I have no idea, no clue. Like where that
give it a number, damn it.
So impossible. And then what's the maze? Is that a thing down there? There's like a confluence of a bunch of freeways.
Oh, I don't know if I've ever heard it been titled that, but yeah, I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's like a mess. And I'm like, what's that thing? Why is it always fucked up? Where's it at? I could never figure it out.
It's downtown. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It is can be a harrowing experience.
So
for the...
here's what's great. This episode isn't just like a family favor. Steve has grown up in the music industry, and we're talking like top level musicians down to some beginner bands. And what I love about having Steve on this, because he was a little apprehensive to come on the show because he self-proclaims, I like being behind the scenes. So my first question to Steve is, why do you like being behind the scenes? What's so appealing about that, being the guy that makes people great? Why do you love it?
Well, I think that's actually maybe two questions, because some people who do what I do also want to be in front of the camera, right? So I think I can't speak for other people. For me, it's just being recognized is not sort of on a fame level is just not something that appeals to me. I don't really know why, but I don't want to be on TV. I don't need to see my name in print. Like just doesn't interest me. But if you're asking why I like to help artists in essence, or help people that do want that, that's obviously a different story, but I think it's an interesting thing to be involved with, right?
Yeah.
And it's a way that I like to say that's the way I practice art. So I'm not a great musician or painter or any of that stuff, or maybe even, I wouldn't even say I'm a good at those things, but I'd like to think I'm a very creative person.
So no music training, like no musical instruments you play?
I mean, I play bad guitar, you know.
But do you have a command of like music theory at all? Or
No. Zero.
Okay.
So what's your background?
I'm an attorney. But, that's not completely
Are all
uncommon
great?
either.
Is it a prerequisite? All great agents and managers have to be?
No. I mean, there's, I think some of the top managers are attorneys, but it's not a prerequisite, although I think it's invaluable training to have those skills. Not just necessarily understanding a contract, although obviously that's valuable, but it's more at least I can only speak from my own experience, but the logical reasoning that you get, the skills and how to organize information and think and speak in a logical manner. I think that had I not gone to law school, I would have had a hard time when I had my first successful artists keeping up with just the volume. And going to law school, being an attorney, you learn the skills on how to handle a vast amount of information and use it.
Yeah.
Right? And this is, maybe this isn't just computers don't change that, right? Logical reasoning and organization and strategic thinking, computer or not, those are skills that you have to have.
At the Hutton School of Law for music managers, what classes would you add in then and get rid of? Like, you don't need mock court and that kind of nonsense, unless you're working on argumentative things, whatever. But
well, in law school, like I didn't even take, I think they offered entertainment law, or they didn't even offer entertainment law. They offered like trademark and copyright class. The law school I went to, which was, University of Wisconsin, was a top 20 law school when I went. I think it still is. It's a good law school. They had that like once every third year.
yeah,
And I skipped it, I think, my second year because the timing was bad for my day.
yeah.
And I didn't realize that they wouldn't offer it again. So I didn't have any classes in law school that necessarily pertain to what I do now. It's more, I think the classes are almost, the subjects are irrelevant. It's the inherent, again, the thought process that goes into being an attorney, or at least behind legal education, was super valuable. And again, I think we were talking earlier off the mic about different philosophies and operating systems in different parts of life.
Yeah.
And how that colors your judgment and how you get skills from it as well. And so that's what I'm referring to with law school.
I like the stories you tell about your engagements within the music industry, from really small bands to your first client, who we'll get back to and talk about ultimately, and some of the in-betweens, and the fact that it's such a people business, and having a law background, having a legal background enables you to think analytically and formulate arguments, because you do have to negotiate. You do have to sell people, and not just sell people to like buy records or listen to this. You're talking about the artists themselves.
Yeah.
You have to sell them on themselves at times to be better on stage, to take advantage of opportunities that you're presenting them from a non-music perspective. And we were talking about that too, as it pertains to podcasting in this crazy world. And I think that was a very interesting point of how you tied that together. And I don't know, the question to you would be then, when you're graduating from law school, you're from Michigan, you go to University of Wisconsin, you get a law degree. Do you practice law and then move into the management business?
Yeah, I graduated law. I went to University of Wisconsin, graduated law school.
Wisconsin for undergrad as well?
No, I went to Michigan for undergrad. That I'm proud to say I'm a Wolverine. Yeah, I graduated law schools, and the economy was really bad at the time, and I found myself back in my parents' house, waiting, studying for the bar, and then waiting for my results. And economy was really bad, and there weren't just a lot of jobs to be had, and no one wanted to hire someone that wasn't licensed, right? So I was just in purgatory, and I had just gone from undergrad, took a year off, but then law school, so I'm used to working.
Yeah.
And I find myself 25 years old with nothing to do, and I was just miserable. It was the worst.
Every 25-year-old graduates college is like, I'm going to have a great job and make $100,000 a year. Like, newsflash.
Yeah.
Fuckers.
Yeah. It was definitely not a high point of my life. I mean, I was watching a lot of Oprah, but that was maybe
See, that's why Steve's comfortable in his level of coolness to just say that. And then not just because it's a Chicago-based, show, but Oprah.
I like at the time it was like, what else are you gonna do? And it was a pretty good show.
It was great. Yeah, I'm talking about interviews.
But yeah, if you're talking about Oprah as like the high point of your day, you're not in a good place.
Yeah, you might want to set some goals for yourself.
You could have worked at Springer though.
Yeah,
that's also filmed right there.
I have a good Springer story.
What is that? This show is 4 stories, so let's hear it.
We were doing, I was with a client. We were doing the MTV Spring Break, and Mexico. I think we were in Cancun, maybe. No, Acapulco.
Okay.
And Springer was one of the guests. And afterwards, there was this, those bubble machines?
Yeah.
Right? Foam parties. They had one set up, but no one was in it. And at the time, it was very new. And Jerry just goes in, he's smoking a big cigar. He's got a couple cute girls with him. And he's like, okay. And he just walked right through. I'm like, this guy is so cool.
Yeah,
he was super cool. I'm just like, yeah.
Okay, so you went from sitting on the couch, you're watching Oprah, and then we broke into the Springer story, which is great.
Isn't that how it goes, right? Oprah.
It's absolutely how it goes.
You're watching Oprah and you're hanging out with Jerry in the bubble machine.
How do you get engaged in becoming a manager? And first, let's answer this question for the listeners. There's obviously seems to be some pecking order between agent and manager. Where is that, or is that just a difference of terms?
No, it's not necessarily a pecking order. It's just a different job.
Are managers better than agents? Are you superior?
You know what?
to
Honestly, I think I gotta be honest. I think agents are a lot smarter because they're
where do publicists?
They're one spot.
What about
removed.
publicists?
Steve's
like, I can't say anything.
Hey,
We've
listen.
all got friends who are publicists.
I think it's like anything. A really good publicist is someone to be respected. Anyone that does anything really well, people will respect.
That's a great answer.
Totally
agree.
Yeah,
totally agree.
I mean, there's publicists that are like,
I think too. What I've seen since I've transitioned, going from 24 years in the Marine Corps to being a writer and an author and speaking is. There is kind of a pecking order, but it's not. I don't say that attributionally. Is age-wise, is the publicist seem to be around the college grad to middle 30s. Then you become in the marketing department. Then you become an agent because you've developed all these contacts. Then you've got the skills, and you become maybe, I don't know what the next level is. But how does manager fall into? Is a manager you're able to control everything?
Well, I mean, if you're asking what a manager's job is. I think you're basically the CEO, right? So you're running the corporation. You're making sure everyone else is doing their job. You should be setting the strategy and carrying out the tactics. That's what I think a good manager does. A good agent, I have great respect for great booking agents. It's a more, I don't know, narrow is not the right word, but it's a specialty. Yeah, managers, it is more narrow. Managers are more of a generalist. We have to deal with everybody and everything. And agents, for example, are more like, how do I get the artists on the right tours? And when they're headlining, how do I book them the best tour that helps them grow and gets, a good amount of money without burning people? Or some agents don't look at it that way, but not to talk too much about agents, but it's a different thing. But I think anything military or any other industry, you're only as good as your team. So if you're a really good manager, but you don't have a good booking agent or a good record label or a good artist or whatever, then you're not going to be successful. You really need a great team.
Well, Pete can validate this too. Is at every level in the military, as a manager, as a commander, if you're looking at that close-up fight and you're not looking at the big picture, and you got the commander or your manager's down there at every show and he's backstage worrying about how the cables are plugged into the guitar, the lighting.
Oh my God.
Who's fighting the big fight?
Right.
Yeah.
Who's fighting the big fight? Hutton's fighting the big fight in your world. In this crazy music world where, again, we were talking earlier on the show, it's like, everybody's got talent in some way and everybody thinks they can contribute or be the next great sensation. But how does somebody really set themselves apart in that industry?
Well, you're talking about.
I mean, 30. You've been doing this for what, 30 years now?
No, 25.
Okay, 25 years. Only a quarter of a century.
It just feels like 100. So I'm sorry. So what's your question though?
When you see these new artists or anyone, even outside of the people you manage, what is that one thing that really lights up in you and you say like, God, this is going to be the next great person, or this person brings something that sets them apart?
Well,
to get into just that initial stage.
I mean, for me, in a way, it's sort of simple because I've had this experience where, and I'm not a person who, believes in astrology or any of that stuff, but literally This has happened to me where I see an artist, I see an aura, a white light around their head. And it's happened to me like 4 times maybe in my life where I've seen that. And the artists, and all of them have either were or became superstars. But unfortunately, because those people are really rare, as you can imagine, that doesn't happen every day. It doesn't even happen every year. It doesn't even necessarily happen every decade, at least for me, right? It's and for anyone. There's only so many new stars every few years anyhow, right?
Randy Jackson talks about you can have like the talent and you can have the ability to sell. Very rarely do you have those two things together. You can be the greatest singer, guitarist, songwriter ever, but if you don't have that magic.
Right. It's that X factor.
Yeah.
It's not even the ability to sell. It's just, I wouldn't term it that. I would just, do you have that magic fairy dust? And for me, I would define it as like, that person is just so other.
Yeah.
So exceptional and different than anyone else you've ever met in your life. Those are the superstars. Those are the people that the whole room, wherever they go, they are the center of gravity.
Yeah.
And it's obvious. But that, again, unfortunately, I mean, that's what makes them special is because they're special. They're different. You know, when I was working with Seu Jorge, who's one of the biggest artists from Brazil and a huge worldwide star.
Seu,
I mean,
what's going on?
He's
Seu, tune in, buddy.
He's he just like, he was like a young Muhammad Ali. Like he just had this thing about him. He literally had, if you sat next to him, you could feel the heat radiating from his body.
Yeah.
He was a star, literally a star, right? He just had that thing. And that's what I strive for. It's rare, but that's what I'm always looking for.
We need to mention, too, that this segment of the Break It Down show is brought to you by the National Astrologists Association.
That's right.
Thank you for sponsoring. No, it's not, of course not. But that
Dionne Warwick and Psychic Friends.
It's brought to you by it's brought to you by Dionne Warwick and Psychic Friends Network.
But go back to that aura thing though, because I want to understand this better. Because it's one thing to say I saw an aura, but you know, what does that mean?
Well, at least in 1 or 2 cases, I literally saw like a white light around the person's head.
Yeah,
like there was a spotlight on the person's head wherever we.
Is it like instant, like right there, it shows up? Like if I'm on, you know, whatever your local, if I'm on the L and I'm sitting across from this guy, I'm like, holy shit, that's him? Or is it something where you have to hear him and vibe with him before the light turns on?
It's hard to answer that because every time I sort of knew who the person was or it was in a musical setting, right?
Sure.
So if I saw that person on the L, but I will tell you a story because I don't think it makes a difference, which is that my wife, then my girlfriend and I went to a wedding in Vermont. We walked in, it was a small wedding. And I see this gentleman there, it's an older guy. I mean, he was in his like his 80s. And I just looked at him. I'm like, who is that? I just knew instantly he was someone special. I could just tell. Like I just immediately, that guy was the center of the room. And so I talked to him and it turns out he had been the wrestling coach at Harvard for like 60 years. He was just a legend, I guess. And I just talked to him and immediately this guy was just so zen, so sort of self-actualized and sort of gone through life and got it, right? I don't know. I think that we all have the ability to sense that to one degree or another. I think, I mean, this is what I do for a living. So I think I've learned through being around a lot of people that weren't stars and as well as people that were. And, you know, I don't know.
You got to be tuned into that.
You have to be tuned in.
You got to be tuned into that.
You have to be tuned in. But I think we all like in whatever setting we'll see someone and like, you know, you look again and for whatever reason you're drawn to that person.
And we call that in the military command presence. Like you walk into a room and you don't even have to say anything necessarily to have command presence. And I'm not saying you have to be an officer to be that either.
Right. Yeah.
There's enlisted guys where you know who's in charge.
Yeah.
Like there's something about them that pulls you into them. They have
absolutely,
you know, it's cliche, like magnetic personality. There is something that people want to gravitate around people like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because they are educated and I think caring and insightful. I mean, those are the qualities. Again, we talk a lot about leadership on this show, and we haven't even scratched the surface on what it means to be a great leader in your industry, what makes a successful leader in your industry. But I talk about all those things, the military jargon about, there's charts and stuff about, justice, JJ did tie buckle and, leadership and decisiveness and integrity. Yeah, those are great. But the words that they don't teach you are like love and compassion and caring and understanding and humility. And man, if somebody would have given me that lesson early on, I would have been a more effective leader way, way earlier in my career. And, that was over a 24-year career. I'd never been asked the question, hey, what year did you figure that out? I don't know. I don't know what year that was, but
it's a gradual thing.
It is. It comes with experience, which I'm sure you can talk to. So let's go back.
But I think, just if I can interrupt, I think a star in your world is probably different than a star in mine in some respects, because it's a different kind of thing. Those kind of skills that would give someone command presence and that respect. There's a lot of overlap, but in a musician, it's not, you don't necessarily need to be that way.
Yeah. Well,
but you have to be able to project that at least,
I like using those comparisons though too. And Pete does as well, where we try and use our combat experience and use our lens to filter other people's experiences through that. And so people understand, and we had the same discussion with Tito when we were up at Punishment, was, I was talking to his business partner today on the phone, and we're talking about helping veterans, military service, and I was telling a great story about Tito when we were up there, how he's got some sort of, I don't say this disparaging Tito because I love him, he's all heart, whatever, some sort of guilt patriotism where he felt like he should have joined the Marine Corps. And I'm like, dude, you're plus 40 now. Don't join the Marine Corps. Like you've taken enough beating. He's broken more bones in his body than I ever have. And I told him this is that the military doesn't own words like service and sacrifice and leadership. Those are words that everybody can apply. And we just try and say, this is how we did it to be effective. And granted, we use those words and those leadership styles under some of the worst conditions, some of the most dangerous conditions where lives depended on it. And that's probably the great delta, right? Is, at the end of the day, if you're not a great leader in the music industry, no one's going to die.
Right.
So when you're, but also when you're a great leader and you understand, like, I'm telling you this and understand things may look bad, but no one's going to die. And they'll look to you as, Hutton's a good leader. Like he's really given that to me in a way where you're right. Things aren't that bad, right? First world problems. We talk about that.
Yeah.
Our kids are running around here like, Daddy, my iPad's only at 40%. Like crazy. Wow. Hellish day on earth in wine country.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's go back. You talked about your first big client, but you didn't say like your first client. Was your first client your first big client?
Technically, no, but
this is what everybody's been dialed in for. Is like, what was his first big client? Who was that? Who was it?
Kid Rock.
Kid Rock. Wow.
It's my fault.
Your fault?
My fault.
I love this story.
What happened?
What happened? In what respect?
You're gonna tell me. I mean,
this is a great story.
You're like, were you at like the Meijer and you're like, hey, you got nice long hair. That's a nice hat. Is that a pork pie hat?
Well, yeah. So your homies from Michigan, Detroit boys. Tell the story, Steve. This is your story.
The story is, well, when you say what happened, that's it's a long story.
Long
so
story.
Which part of the what happened
show.
did you mean? Yeah. Jesus.
All right. Will Ferrell, Talladega Nights. Tell the story.
Right. As far as I met him, I was living in Detroit, like I mentioned earlier, living on my parents' couch, waiting to get a job. And then eventually I did get a job. I almost was so, just losing my mind waiting to get a job, waiting for my bar results, that I just like, you know what? I'm going to move to New York and just start temping at record companies and get a job that way. Because that was one of the ways in, right? I was just like, I was going to forget the whole music biz or the whole legal thing and just go straight to that. And then at the last second, I got a job at a corporate litigation firm in Detroit. That was, like a good job. So I'm like, all right, I'll give it a go, see if I like this or not. So I'm there. And then I notice in the Metro Times, which is like LA Weekly of Detroit, right? It's a weekly periodical that everyone reads, that there was a recording studio called the White Room, and they were having their annual Christmas party, and all the bands that record there throughout the year, all the local bands would go and be performing. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to this. And this is, if I'm going to be stuck in Detroit at this law firm, I want to get in the scene and just do this music stuff on the side and just sort of keep a hand in it or try to get a hand in it. So I go down there and not a lot of people there. And I meet the guys that have the studio, that own the studio. And they're like, hey, great. Come by, hang out. At the time, there weren't any 25-year-old lawyers hanging out in downtown Detroit in the 90s with the economy being awful. Yeah. So they were happy to have me hanging. And we just sort of, I just moved back. I didn't really have a lot of friends left over, because I'd been gone. So these guys became my friends and did a little legal work for them. And one day I had heard about Kid Rock because he was sort of a local celebrity and he'd been dropped by 2 labels and he had a small room within the studio. And I literally walked in and saw an aura, a white light. And I was like, holy shit, this guy's a star. And he handed me a demo of some new songs, including a song called I Am the Bull God, which was on his first major label record. But at the time, he was still doing hip hop. And I met him. He's like, cool, you can be my lawyer, right? So we just became friends. And then I met his manager, and I could just tell that this was not going to be a successful long-term relationship. And so I just hung in there, and he was, at the time, a lot of fun to spend time with. So we would just hang out, and
But 4 years, right?
well, yeah, but so I'm giving the first 6 months or 9 months of knowing him. About, 6 months into knowing him, 9 months in, he calls me and he says, hey, I fired my manager last night. We got a show tonight in Sarnia. Can you make it? And by this point, I had left the law firm because I wasn't happy there. And I decided to make the switch into music. But I would do...
What did your parents think about that move?
You know what? They were pretty understanding, I think. And I was also young enough that, I wasn't necessarily throwing the law away, but they knew I wasn't happy. And it just was, there's a lot of stuff about practicing law that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And I do it from time to time, as Scott's heard this week. It's just pretty dry and academic. And I just realized that. And I'm like, this is not, I can't go through life doing something like this that doesn't stimulate me.
Right.
So anyhow, I was doing court-appointed work, and, I'm 25 years old, and, I have very little expenses. I'm just, it's like I don't need a lot to live, and start dabbling in becoming a manager and found a couple acts to work with over 6 to 9 months. And then he called me and said, hey, fired my manager. We got a show in Sarnia. Can you make it? And I said, yeah. And we worked together for 8 years, and 4 years of which was developing him and trying to get him a point where he could get a record deal again after he'd been dropped twice, and finding a sound. And I was slowly pushing him towards a rap rock combination, which at the time, there wasn't a lot of successful artists that were doing rap and rock. It really wasn't a thing.
Right.
But eventually I got him a record deal, and we had a lot of success, and, kind of doesn't, has a tendency not to pay his bills. And that happened with me, and it became an issue, and we parted ways. Yeah. I'm giving a very truncated version, but that's the story.
Yeah. We've had the untruncated version, it's a good story, but that's it. That's a pretty crazy connection in the situation you're in. It's such an early time in the career too. What's the cliche they always say, relationships always end bad, or they say they wouldn't end if they wasn't badly, but relationships end. Despite it all, you learn through that.
Sure.
You learn through the wins and the losses, which I always talk about.
Yeah.
But do you think, and you don't have to give any credit here, that's not what I'm asking. Do you think that connection, as you became his manager in Tidal, helped propel you into more things and want to help other people? And then,
what do you mean? As far as,
do you think that gave you credibility?
Well, of course. Yeah. It sold 14 million records. It's a lot of records. Yeah. Yeah. I have a diamond platinum record in my office. There's only, I think there's been less than 100 of those in the history of the music business. Yeah.
Less than 100.
Yeah. And I think his was probably, I'm guessing, but of the last 10, he's probably one of the last 10 people that got one.
Yeah.
And then, it will never happen again. Obviously, the record industry is different and people don't buy now, but
10 million records.
No one is going to sell 10 million records.
Yeah.
If God came down from heaven and made a record, it wouldn't sell 10 million.
Right. The actual God, not the bull God.
Not exactly. Well, the bull God might sell 9, but But yeah.
Did you know how to become a manager, or did you have to learn that on the job?
Well, I learned that on the job. And the thing is, I learned that by managing Kid Rock primarily for 4 years, where it was just him and I. So I was a record label, I was a booking agent, I was a publicist, and I was a manager. I was then in the business manager. I was everything.
Yeah.
So, which was great experience, at least to a certain level, because I had a grassroots understanding of what it was like to call a radio station when they didn't want to hear from you, or a newspaper or whatever, and find a way to pitch it so that they would even listen to me. Right. So that was a great learning experience, but there's still only so much experience you can get when you have an artist that isn't at a bigger level, right? I hadn't dealt with a record company before. I hadn't dealt with a major booking agency before. I didn't know how to, like, oh, you're going on tour. We need a bus. We need a van. Where the hell do I get one of those?
Yeah.
How do you get one? Where do I get? Who do I call?
They actually have a book for that. Mix Magazine made a book. Like, this is how you go on tour.
Let's come back to that.
I wish I had that book.
Right?
About the how-to, because me and Steve Steve's a great idea guy, and he loves stealing ideas too, which I love about him.
That's not true.
That is true. This is totally true. There's nothing going to be held back because it's family rules. But we're gonna talk about that in a little bit.
Stealing ideas.
Stealing. We've had a lot of great ideas over the years. Some have come to fruition. Some are in development.
Some are stillborn.
Yeah, some are stillborn. I think we've had some beef jerky ideas. We've had anything from T-shirt ideas. I think we had at a time. But yeah, the list is long.
If the idea is good enough that you actually start doing something, then it's probably a pretty good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a big believer of any like store operation, like muffins. Like, let's say your wife's like, I have to make cupcakes. You're like, yeah, but it's also like a drug testing facility as well, right? You come in, you pee in a cup, grab a cupcake, leave. That's the perfect combination, because no one ever wants to go to the Quest Diagnostics. They're not a sponsor.
That's great.
Right?
I love that. Hey, you get an awesome cupcake.
Right.
Okay, not so bad.
Yeah, Starbucks, why aren't they doing that?
Right.
The slash business. Please continue though.
Well, I don't know what to say after that.
Let's talk about, so the other cool thing too is, because we're family, is, and I will say this, Steve has a very deep respect for the military. They flew, when I retired in 2013, they flew out from Chicago to be there for my retirement. They've always been there. We're very, very close. We talk a lot. So Steve has this deep affection, and he's such a curious person. He loves asking questions. He really wants to. That's why I told him, I said, you should have a podcast, Steve. Like, you ask a lot of great questions. He's always asking questions about what we do, how it happens. And through that, Steve always offers up his personal connections, which, again, I always listen to, like Paul Conroy. Like, when Steve says, like, hey, you got to take this meeting. And Paul, if you're listening, I know he'll listen to this show too. Like, hey, Paul, what's up, buddy? We went down, had lunch, and it was like we were separated at birth. And as we start talking, it's like, bing, bing. Guess who Paul knows? Fran Strine. Hey, Fran. What's happening, brother? Fran's been on the show. So it's 2 degrees of separation. Right. So I love that about Steve, that he shares this. And one of the things we're working on is, I don't even know where this idea was born, about all those skill sets you were just talking about. You were the manager, the publicist, the booking agent. You were selling merch. You're doing all this. And so where were we when we came up with the idea? And you tell everybody the idea, since we both kind of spitballed it, but.
Well, let's make sure this podcast comes out after we actually launch the idea.
Well, no, we don't. The idea is this idea is going to happen. We're still in development, but even if it is just a concept, I think it's a great idea. Where you want to keep it classified.
No, we can.
Well, I'll just say this.
We'll just talk about it, and then we can figure what we're going to do with it after the fact.
I think that the idea was so great that Steve's love of the military and the affection that I was just talking about is, he wants to allow veterans kind of exclusive, I don't know, say backdoor access or front door access, VIP access into that whole world, where we give them these opportunities and train them and provide them with this very unique experience. And we want to do that because Steve understands the type of people that come from the military, the work ethic and the dependability and the loyalty that they have.
Grace under pressure, right?
Yeah. So we're talking about these road managers, or whatever level they're at, again, at the end of the day, no one will be bleeding. So they'll have a better perspective on how to manage personalities, young bands, old bands, country bands, rock bands, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We really feel like this is something unique that we have the connections between our relationship and family and networks that we can provide this opportunity. So that's kind of what we're working on. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But we want to do it. We want to make sure it's done right. And we got so many smart people involved. And Replay, is it still Replay?
They've changed the name. And
they got a new name. Edit that out. So we have these unique connections, and part of that connection is down in Nashville.
Sean Murray at the Relay Group.
Sean, what's happening, brother? If you're listening,
is part of this. So hopefully we'll launch it. But I think there's an opportunity there's a good marriage between certain skills that you learn in the military and certain skills that could serve you well in the touring industry.
Yeah, one of my friends growing up's a backstage manager for the Eagles.
It's a tour manager.
Yeah. Well, he's on the backstage part, so he makes sure everything.
Production.
Yeah, like if the couch needs to be there, it's always the couch. It's the right couch. All the laundry gets done. He makes sure all those things happen. And, it's a significant job, but it's a military operation.
Yeah.
20-hour days all the time. They love setting up in one, like we're going to be in Sydney for 8 days. Thank God. Because we can get some sleep. Otherwise,
exactly. It is a military operation.
Yeah. And there's no time, like when something happens, and something always happens, you put in a dip, you get back to work and you keep going. Like today's a 36-hour day. That's just how it is. That for sure links right back to what we do. Anybody who's done combat time, like on the ground, outside of the wire, you've dealt with that for sure. Like, if you know how this goes, if you find, I'm pointing at Scott, if you find an unexploded bomb, you own that thing. And on TV, the bomb guys drive in, they're like, hours and hours and hours and hours. They're 5 miles away, but it takes 5 hours to spin them up, quick reaction, and then shoot out. And then you sit there and until they do something with it. So your 2-hour patrol that was going to be a quick meet turns into a 12-hour thing.
Yeah.
What's the EOD equivalent in the music industry, Steve? Like, because now there's 1,000 bombs and you've got like 5 EOD teams to like defuse all these bombs. So like everybody's sitting out there like, we want to get back in the fight, but we can't just leave these unexploded bombs. So what's the unexploded bomb in the music industry? And then who would?
Well, that's my job.
That's you.
Yeah. Well, put it this way. I used to have my business checks. I remember going and picking out like what they were going to look like and everything. And then they're showing me logos. And then I saw they had a firefighter's logo, and I put that on my checks because that's what I do is I put out fires, right? That's an unexploded bomb. I mean, I woke up this morning and I had a phone call for an issue that wasn't really, I thought was no longer an issue, and now it was a big issue, right? So I have to deal with it, and you have to drop everything else and focus and get through it, you know?
What's the biggest threat or enemy of the music industry right now on the modern day battlefield?
So before you walk out on patrol, you go through all of your basic things, right? Rules of engagement, shout, show, shove, shoot, 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 all that stuff. Everybody talks all about it, so you know what to do. Most likely course of action from the enemy, most deadly course of action. Every patrol, every time. What's the most deadly thing they can do? They can, improvise, explosive device, that kind of thing. So what's that for you guys?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the music industry, that's a big overarching thing. I would think it's just, it's mind share. It's competing with social media, which didn't exist. Unlimited choices for really quality TV, video games, sports, religion, everything. Everything's competition, and it's harder and harder. When people expect music to be free. I mean, I think we have a decent solution now with streaming, and I think that sort of crisis is over, but it's still, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, music played such a huge role in the culture. And, now there's so much competition for people's time that, kids just don't care as much, or aren't going to put their time in to go see a show when they can sit on a couch,
what about at the
playing video games?
Then? Like you guys are going to load into Joe Louis Arena. Is that just so like all of the abnormal things are so done that you know how to handle anything anyhow? Or
well, if you're talking about like a touring,
arena-sized
act,
touring act.
Well, that's not necessarily directly my job as a manager because I'm not a road manager. I don't go on the road. I don't really deal with.
But you still get phone calls like this is screwed up.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean. Sure.
from every angle too.
Yeah,
every
So
angle.
You get that from friendly and enemy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
like the band's calling you, the arena manager's calling, like, hey, the band's late. And then the band's like, my couch isn't there, or like the
Uh-huh.
sound check didn't go off,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, you can get it
That-
from any angle. So it's, I mean, yeah, to sit there and say,
Jeez.
I love that philosophy of like, what are the possible responses? What's likely and what's most deadly? In the music business, there's no answer. It's like, I don't, infinite amount of
Right.
deadly and then an infinite amount of likely. And it's navigating minefield. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I like about it is that it's never boring. Usually I don't sit around going, God, bored.
I wish something would happen.
Yeah. I mean, you go through periods where you're busier than others.
Yeah.
But especially when you're busy, and it sort of, comes in waves. But yeah, I'm never bored. I'm never lacking motivation. Well, yeah, some days I'm more focused than others,
Yeah.
sure. But yeah, it's never truly boring by any stretch. And I like that. And, you're in situations, I'm sure you guys have been in them, where you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this situation. And you find a way. Right?
Yeah. Normally, by being surrounded by great people too, but there are times too where you feel alone, and you just have to make that decision on your own. And hopefully, based off of your training and your education and your experience, you do make the right decision. But I think in any field, in any profession you get into, whether it's music or education or military, you have to be a decision maker and understand that it's not 100% solution all the time, and there's going to be losses. That's a harsh reality of what we do, and those losses are tough for us. But in any industry, if you're not willing to take risk and assume risk as a leader or as a manager, I think that you'll struggle. And
Sure.
I've seen that time and again. You're a great example of someone that you've won fights and you've lost fights, and you've assumed a lot of risk. And there's times where, I've heard you say where, the risk wasn't worth it at times, and everybody questions that. Every commander at every level questions that. Everybody that's in every profession questions that. And I think that's a natural thing to do. But you've been successful because you've pressed through. And in those times where you question it, I think it's cool too. Just listen, hanging out this week, you're talking about picking up legal cases and how that kind of energized you, like to get back to where you started. You're like, this is kind of cool, but I wouldn't want to do it for a living. Because the excitement of the music industry is really what your passion is.
Sure.
Yeah.
I find it just intrinsically interesting.
So when you're done with the music industry, do you think you're going to do something else? Or will Steve Hutton always be tied to the music industry in some way?
I don't know. I go through periods where I've just hit my end and I can't take it anymore. I don't know. It's definitely like a heroin habit you can't kick, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'll probably always have at least one client that I'm trying to.
Who are the
help.
Who are the clients today? And you don't have to name names that keep you energized. What is it about them that keeps you in this business?
Well, I'm happy to talk like a lot of my
talk about
focus
some of the
right
clients
now.
You got right now.
I have a
kick-ass
act named Too Many Zoos. They're a pretty interesting band. It's a baritone sax, a trumpet, and a percussionist.
Really?
Yeah. But, touring all over the world and doing amazing things. So, yeah, it's what I think what energizes me, a lot of it is the taking something and making it more successful is a real fun, interesting, and challenging process. And, it's a military campaign, right? Strategy and tactics, what's our goal and how do we get there? And what are the decisions that you have to make day to day and long term that lead to success, and what things do you prevent from happening that are landmines? And, how do you not get killed along the way?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How do you avoid making a permanent mistake? And then, you can sort of figuratively make those people make them all the time. Most people don't have long careers in the music business. The long-term careers are the exception, not the rule.
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
Reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner,
or at JohnLG69.
at The Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show.
most people don't have long careers in the music business. The long-term careers are the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
Right?
So how does someone, I saw so many bands from our youth that are out there, again, they're trying to recapture it and do whatever level tour they can get on, whether it's county fairs or whatever it is in the summertime. But how does a band that, like, this is how we can make money. We want to get out on the road. We've got, we got enough of a show to put together. How do they get back out? Like, they come and approach you, and it's
well, if it's a known act, then
yeah,
there's...
sure. I mean, but known, what's known? Like Killer Pussy's an old punk band from the 80s, right? They're going to go back out on the road. So you have to go play punk venues and everything, but they're known in that little niche from that little hunk of time. But they certainly have people.
Well, they're probably not going to be going very far on their tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. If it's an act that had, like, I think I just saw the Matt Johnson. I was a huge fan.
Sure, there you go. Yeah.
And they came out, but, he quit the music business. I'm trying to remember the story. I might be getting it wrong in the off chance that he's listening, but I believe his wife died of cancer or something, and he really just had a hard time with it and just decided to, I think he had, I could be getting it wrong, but I think he associated so much of her with music, and he just needed to step away to grieve. Yeah. And I'm a huge fan. I have his records from back in the day, and I went to see him. But yeah, he came back and he played where I saw him at probably a 2,000 or 3,000, probably 3,000 cap room, which is great.
Yeah.
But he just, they put the tickets on sale and they judged the level of excitement and reaction. But he had also left at a pretty high level, So I think you kind of can sort it out by where did they leave? Most times you go away, you don't usually come back bigger.
Right. What about someone who's like Mark? I think about Mark King and like Stuart Copeland. They have their band, and those guys don't have to do anything they don't want to do. So they put together stuff that excites them, and that stuff's not always largely commercially viable, right? But they can take it on the road because it's Mark King and it's Stuart Copeland and that kind of thing. When someone approaches you with an idea like that, and it's mostly names, but what they're creating is not going to be like poppy at all.
Right.
What do you do with something like that?
Well, again, it depends on if it's a big name,
Mhm.
people are going to come out because they're interested to see what that person is doing.
Yeah.
Right. But
Right.
if, someone who had a B or C level career and then they come back doing something different, ain't no one going to care. Right.
It's true.
Yeah,
So-
that would be. Name recognition would have a lot to do with my attendance at an event like that.
Of course.
What is he doing now?
Right.
He did so many great things. Like, what is he doing now?
Well, if there's an artist that you loved and you haven't seen him in 20 years or whatever, or maybe never saw him and they're coming back, you're probably going to be excited to go see him. Right. It just, it depends on the artist. But if, I named a band that you never heard of that might have been great, you didn't go then. You're certainly not going to go now. You haven't discovered him. If you didn't know him 20 years ago, you probably aren't going to know him now.
What I like about Steve too is I say this with all love and affection, is he's kind of an elitist scumbag when it comes to discussing music. So it's hard to keep up in the arena, and with you, Pete, when it comes to discussing music. Not that I'm not a huge music fan,
Right.
but when you have to manage new bands coming into the arena and you start dropping names like the or even I can even say like, yeah, I manage Kid Rock, and they go, who's that? Like, does your time in the industry, like, oh my God, or do you grin and bear it because like, hey, this is a new generation of musicians?
Well, it depends on the level of the artist's success again. So you sort of expect it or not. But yeah, you do. I mean, I guess to answer your question, I've come across artists and musicians, even executives who don't know a particular act. I'm like, what? And I don't necessarily take it as, oh shit, I've gotten old. It's more like, it's, I don't know, culture moves fast. And I think people, look, music, art, it's like food, Why is there McDonald's in every corner, but there's only one French Laundry, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. I tend to be, I love history. I love the history of the music business. I love the history of music. So I know that knowledge is important to me, but there are people who don't take the effort, which I think is frankly disrespectful and ridiculous, not to know the history.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of viewing person as are you a student of your trade? Are you
Do you
practicing your
care
craft?
about it? Yeah.
And Steve's an avid reader too. He as I don't know if I should say this out loud, but Steve probably reads way more than me. I don't know if it's because I'm writing more, reading and then writing, but not just about the music industry. Steve pitches me books and says, "Oh, you should read this," and we have a little interfamily book club going on. But he pitches me great books to read sometimes too, because he's all over the place. We do the same thing, but I think that's a real important thing when you're talking any industry that you're in is being a student of the trade.
Absolutely.
And I think you garner a lot of respect.
Yeah.
From your peers and from new people when they can see, man, this guy absolutely knows what he's talking about. You do.
Thanks. I agree.
You're welcome.
I think maybe a lot of people don't do their homework. You want to do something, you want to be a great actor, then, know who John Huston was. Like, but
Yeah.
there's, as an example, I bet you ask people, 10, 20-year-old stars if they know who John Huston is. And I wouldn't
put it this way. People don't they want to change the name of the Bob Hope and the John Wayne airports because who are those guys?
Right. Exactly. And that's
crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's culture. But yeah, I think it's lame if that's what you want to do for a living, to not do your homework and understand the perspective and the history of the field. But, to each his own, I guess.
When you're out there reading books, obviously you read things that are in your industry. We've had a bunch of music writers on the show, but what books impact you? Like you go, wow, this is really good. I need to keep some of this for what I do.
Well, if you want me to talk about particular books there was a great book I read. Actually, I didn't even want to say it because I don't want other people to read it, but because it's been so great. But
you like to keep stuff close hold. You don't like to give up your secrets.
That's part of it.
I don't want to. Yeah, you're precious.
But no, it's what. I'll mention it. People are lazy. They won't read it anyhow.
Human race, 0.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not going to go broke on betting against people's laziness or betting on people's laziness, right? But there's a book called Media Virus that I read in the 90s, for example, that was awesome, that just talked about media. And Douglas Rushkoff, who's a great forward-thinking author. And that book was amazing. It talked about media theory and stuff that I then applied and frankly used a lot with Kid Rock. Like, how do you make something viral? How do you hit influencers? How do you, media loves, how do you manipulate the media? I like, that's one of my favorite things to do is come up with something that the media will feed on. Right.
Yeah.
And he talked about that. And I've taken a lot of those series and make it the basis of what I try to do with marketing.
Yeah, that's a big help.
That's a good book. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in particular that jumps to mind, but I don't know. It's just, I read books because I like to learn and just stimulate my mind and learn about different situations. And I think different situations are all applicable to yourself and your life if you're open to getting the knowledge, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I find I get pigeonholed in reading exclusively nonfiction stuff.
Yeah.
And when I do fall across something great, and like I remember a couple years back, and I probably still got your copy if you want it back, and you can stick it in your suitcase.
Oh, that Nevermind book?
Yeah, Kurt Cobain. Like I was in Chicago, and he's like,
"Did you read it?"
I'm like, yeah, I read it. Of course.
Wasn't that a great book?
Yeah, but it like totally,
no, it's called
totally broke me outside.
It was called it wasn't called Nevermind. Heavier in Heaven.
Heavier in Heaven. Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like, if, for example, when I have read music books, whether it's the history or like a biography, like Shaky, which is about Neil Young, I thought was a brilliant book because the psychological picture of Neil Young was so in depth. And as a guy that's been around stars and superstars and musicians, just rang super true.
Yeah.
Right. Even though every person is different, I just was reading this like, this is just the truth. This is the truth. And Heavier in Heaven just rang true to me as like, yeah, this is the story. This is how it went down. And these were the people involved. And, that book was, as an example, I know a lot of the people in that book, and it was fun to read about them. And that, dealing with such a...
That is cool when you read
once in a lifetime.
The people that either wrote it or, the characters in it. Like,
it's awesome.
Oh my God, I totally know that guy.
Yeah, it's awesome. But so I don't know. I like but a great fiction book too. You can learn something. I mean, man, some of the biggest truths in the world are in fiction, right?
Yeah, totally agree. I just reread the whole Steinbeck series just because I'm a huge fan of the style and the way Steinbeck wrote and the way he uses the character description, just everything. But all those things are learning points, not just as a writer or an artist, but
as a human being.
Yeah, humans. Because I think in fiction you have the opportunity to really say the things that you want to say.
Totally.
And you don't have any repercussions like, oh, it was just fiction. Like, that was totally me you wrote about. No, it was fiction. It was
right. It might have been, but
you.
I was able to say and be honest and still have a relationship and deny it with you. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
A great book is a great book is a great book.
Steinbeck is great with language too. Like if you struggle with writing and something, you could read Steinbeck more, because in 2 words, he says something that I couldn't say in 100.
Yeah.
Or today if you read it, the way he repeats words or repeat phrases in one paragraph at times, and you'd be chastised for that. Well, it's repetitive or redundant. Like, yeah, but he's driving a point home somewhere, and then it is masterful the way to see him as an example in the way he writes. It's great. Yeah.
I want to change the subject a little bit. We do this thing called an album fight.
Right.
On the show. It's an episode that we do. It's sort of should be a standalone show, but who's got time for that? So we take 2 albums and we collide them together like in a boxing format. So track 1 versus track 1.
Right.
Track 2 versus track 2, and it's 10-point must system, right? Like boxing. And then you have 3 judges and they go through and they evaluate the music. And here's what we've learned. One is the floor of the album is as important as the peaks. Like if you're New Order, you wouldn't think New Order of being this mega smash hit band that always has these huge hits. Yes, they've had hits, but their weakest tracks on an album are, they're excellent.
Yeah.
So that matters a lot. And then you can hear bad band decisions. Like when Stevie Wonder doesn't have somebody producing him, you can hear the overindulgence. Because you go against something that's lean and has a good producer. Yeah, it's Sir Duke or whatever song it is from Stevie. You're like, there's too much stuff in this song compared to this.
Yeah.
You must hear things like that where you recognize that, like, hey, Kid Rock, whoever it's going to be, there's not enough here. This bridge needs to be stronger. The chorus needs to have another hook in it.
Right.
But you're not a musician, but you must hear that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm pretty good at that. I am right. I don't claim to be a musician, but I also think that in a way it's a benefit because I just say, listen, I'm listening to it from a fan's point of view, and it's not working for me. And maybe sometimes it is vague, and I can just say I don't know why it just doesn't work. But usually it's like the chorus isn't good enough, or the lyrics aren't memorable, or it just whatever. Yeah. I think you get. I think a good producers. There are some producers out there who really aren't musicians, who are just. Rick Rubin is kind of famous as an example. He's not really a musician. He's not a musician. He just knows what's great. I mean, I'm sure you can break down and say, hey, you should be going to the F flat here. I would imagine he might know enough.
Sure.
But he's really more of a big picture guy.
Yeah. He's an idea guy.
Yeah.
And he takes your thing that you're comfortable with. And he's like, that's not good enough. We're going to push it and figure out what too far is and then bring it back 2 notches.
Well, he's also an example of a guy who, as we were talking earlier, he surrounds himself with greatness. Who, if you work with Rick Rubin, he's got the best guy. He's got an amazing guy mixing it. His engineers are killer. Yeah. And look, that's a skill. Like people can't slag off a guy who's like smart enough to have these guys around him, right? And know what someone's great, recognize talent, and put them in a position to win. Guys have gone on to work with Rick have been huge mixers and producers on their own. So, yeah.
We had Anson Mount on the show. He's just finished up playing Captain Pike on Star Trek on CBS.
Oh, nice.
He's got a fantastic podcast called The Well Pod. You guys should check it out. But he had Exhibit on. Him and Exhibit became friends from a project and everything. And they were comparing and contrasting acting and rapping for Exhibit. And he got to talking about Dr. Dre. And a lot of people talk about Dr. Dre in the studio, but he was hilariously like just talking about like he'd there and Exhibit, he'd be working, getting the line out. And then Dr. Dre would lean over and go, do it again. And then he'd do it again, but do it again. I just, do it faster. do it again. And not much direction, making the artist do it. And he's like, and here's the thing is like, if you don't know that you're in this together and he's on your side and helping you, and if you let your ego get in the way and he goes, do it again. And you go, man, I'm giving it to you. He's like, I'll be right back. No, he won't. He walks out and you're in there waiting.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
I'll be right back. Yeah. But I mean, that's how that stuff goes, right?
That's
like,
amazing.
So someone's like, you need to push this idea as an artist. You should be like, this is my time right here. It's what I'm here to do, is to take this thing and push it.
Yeah. You know, a lot of artists have a real hard time with people telling them what to do or giving them input.
Yeah.
And that can ruin a lot of careers.
People have a lot of problem with other people giving them input and time. I think it's a natural defensive action. But we've seen the people who are the most successful in life are receptive to getting different perspectives.
Yeah.
Man, those are the real winners.
Man, you put a great team of people around you, and you're absolutely right. Right? Look, Kid Rock's first album, major label album that sold 10 million. We put a killer band together, and he brought in people who played different parts, and he used those parts.
Yeah.
And recognized a great riff when he heard one, and just, it's like a magpie where he's taking different things and putting it together. You're right. If you're comfortable enough in yourself, then you can handle constructive criticism and input. Yeah. Some people can, some people can't. And usually if you can't handle it, it's to your detriment, because there's very few people whose natural talent is just so brilliant that it's going to overcome their unwillingness to accept those things. There are some, and maybe someone really is that much of a visionary that they're like, no, I have a vision and I got to go this way. But that's pretty rare. And, I had a client recently, I'll paraphrase it, but he basically said, why wouldn't I listen to you? You've got a really nice house on Lake Michigan and I'm poor. Like, of course you know more than me. Yeah. I'm like, wow, thank you for saying that. Like, it's so simple, and yet people don't get that. And it's not about obviously wealth, but he recognized, hey, I had success and I've been doing this a long time, and I'm talking about things that I do. Just because you have teeth doesn't make you a dentist. Just because just because you can play guitar doesn't make you a good strategist for marketing your sound.
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, or they're just not comfortable enough. Whatever, it's a problem.
And you've been. You said you love being behind the scenes, and you're probably surrounded by hundreds of other guys that have that same philosophy as you as behind the scenes guys, and no one will ever know their name. Are there guys in your career that mentored you and gave you sage advice? And this is just an opportunity to be like, "Hey, thanks," or like, "Who are those guys?" Or like, you're like, "No, I did it all myself. I climbed the ladder."
I think there's been people along the way who've given me good bits of advice for sure. For sure. And then this is an ego. I just don't really think I had someone that was particularly a mentor. I would have loved that. I would have absolutely been way into that. I had people
very Gen X-y of us. Like, same thing. We're like, you should have an intro. Like, there was no mentor. I didn't even know how to go to college.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I just went. And I'm like, wait, I had to have an internship. Why did you guys tell me it sucks so bad having an internship?
Dude, no one. I didn't even figure out till I was a junior in high school that my grades counted towards college. True story. True story.
I'm in the club.
True story. I got a college grad professional father, and he never really mentioned, why are your grades so shitty? You're a reasonably smart kid. It took me to the senior year to figure out that maybe I should get all A's, and then I did. But you're right, it is very Gen X.
Yeah.
No one ever told me. But yeah, there's definitely been people who have passed on some great
Do you share that with young managers?
Well, yeah. I'd like to. I enjoy it. If people want to listen. I think people, again, I can't speak for other people, but I enjoy trying to give wisdom that I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I talked to my good friend Anthony Spadero about this, and he hates using the word mentor. He's like, how about friend? Like, a good friend will give you advice and be honest with you and give you their time.
Yeah.
And that's what friends do. Like,
Sure.
we don't have to put a fancy name on it. It's like, Steve's a friend of mine, and he calls me every once in a while and says, hey, how's your client list looking? Have you thought about this? Have you done this? Like, oh, here's one thing I really fucked up badly in the beginning, and make sure you don't do this. And I love that in my profession too, as a writer. When other veterans call me or they email like, hey, do you have time? Can we talk? How did you get an agent? How did you do this? And like, my answer is usually short. It's like Google. Because again, I didn't have someone guiding me along the way. And I don't think that has anything to do with generations. It's just doing all those things takes asking. And you had to make those cold calls to radio stations, get in the industry. And I had to ask favors of my friends. And a lot of them were already successful authors, but I really had to put myself out and say, hey, would you read this? Would you put your 40, 50-year career on the line and say, this book is great, and put your name on it, by the way? And I was very fortunate the fact that they said yes. And now I feel I have a responsibility and a privilege when these young artists and writers and veterans and non-veterans email me and say, hey, could you give me a couple minutes? I'm like, absolutely. It's hard. It's hard for me to say no at this point.
It's something I enjoy. And it's also, there's a big plus. And when you have to do this without help and you make these mistakes and you're living and dying by your mistakes, you're not going to make them twice.
Yeah.
You're going to learn those lessons real fast. I mean, again, obviously you guys, when your literal life is on the line, you can't make that same mistake once.
First week in Ramadi, the commander's like, Scout, we need you to go out and take a team. We got some gunfire at this mosque and they're engaging the school. Roger that, sir. Balls the size of basketballs. We're all wanting to get in the fight. We go out. It's probably 2:00 in the afternoon. We get shot the fuck up. And Sergeant Israel takes one across the nose, and Ricochet, another guy took one to the wrist. And when I got back, I don't know if I said it out loud, but I'm sure I wrote about it. And I said, never again. We're not fucking patrolling during the day. It wasn't a matter of if we were going to get lit the fuck up. It was when and how often.
Bad,
and how badly. And so we owned the night. And you're right. You make that mistake once, and then you're like, you know what? Yeah, we're not doing that again. So we operate at night, and we did our fair share of damage to the bad guys at night, and because we capitalized on our strengths in that environment, obviously.
Well, and how great is it when you have someone? I like to say, you can't make the same mistake once, right? To have someone that can help you avoid those mistakes.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a great benefit, and I have mentored, air quotes. I'd like to thank everyone that's worked for me for an extended period of times, and all those guys are really successful right now.
Yeah.
Paul used to work for me.
Paul Conroy, we talked about his
doing
show.
great.
He not only used to work for you, but he used to sleep on your couch.
Nice.
Because Steve offered, hey, come stay with me. And Paul was, as we figured out, there was 2 degrees of separation. We knew all the same people after being like separated at birth, and we're both the same age. And we're both into like all these healthy lifestyle things. We both got redhead kids. And and then he tells me this great story about Steve's generosity. And he attributed that kind of step up in some small way. Had he not had that opportunity, might not be doing what he did in Hollywood and been so successful there. And now his realization of what's important and doing such great things with his company now. And I thought that was cool. It was another connecting point that we had where Steve made the introductions like, this is an email you want to respond to. And it wasn't just like, hey, I got another great idea. It was legit, and I'm so happy we did because, again, I think, maybe Paul and I were separated at birth, too, because he's just a great guy. Yeah. Totally same philosophy.
Very similar.
Yeah. I want to take this last little segment because this Friday we should be relaxing, but Scott put you on the family rules and put you on the spot and made you come off with some stuff. So I want to give you the chance to ask us a couple questions to return the favor, and we'll just be just as honest as everything else.
Awesome. Shit, I wasn't prepared for this.
That's what I was hoping for.
Man. Yeah. No, I wish I would have come up with some awesome stuff.
Unprepared as usual.
Oh, I'm unprepared.
You can always count on laziness.
Steve is reliably unreliable. Thank you, Hutton.
Oh, come on. Oh, this is a great opportunity. Man, I'm on the spot here. I mean, I feel like I've talked, not that I know everything by any stretch about your experiences or even remotely, but I feel like I've asked Scott a fair amount of questions over the years.
What's a good one then? Let's let the audience, our friends who are listening, get a chance to review.
Well, I think I was interested in how it works and the organizational aspects of it, but Like, I don't know. I don't know if this is the right answer, but like with the military jargon that I've picked up, I find really fascinating.
Tell everybody your favorite word.
Copy. Yeah. Love that word. It's my favorite word from Scott, and I use it all the time because I love it because, at least to me, it says a lot, but it's super succinct.
So if you want to, like, one of my pet peeves is people that add extra words to those short things. Just Wilco.
Yeah.
Everything's said. He knows
Yeah.
exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
If I say copy, I might say, copy, but I never say copy that.
I just say copy.
Copy. That's it. You got it.
Yeah.
Copy.
Copy.
And then I find that my clients now use it too.
Yeah.
Which is because it's just a good phrase. But no, like what check your six, or what is it?
Check your six.
Check your six. And you've had some others that
that was our t-shirt idea. We're going to do t-shirts.
Don't say-
T-shirts with a knife sharpener built in on the left side.
Check your six t-shirts
But yeah,
by Steve
I-
Hutton, Scott Huesing, patent pending.
Well, again, I think the military philosophy, which I'm sure I've only seen, the very surface of, is fascinating because it's an operating principle that obviously works, right? And then I find stuff like that. Maybe it's operating principles to be really interesting in different industries because I feel like whatever it is, it's applicable to other fields. And, that's just the sort of, I don't want to say hidden truth because that's not it, but the wisdom behind any organization or field, right? Whether it's military or we were talking earlier that I have friends in the recovery movement.
Yeah.
And I find that very fascinating. And the philosophy behind changing your life and being able to avoid this thing that's got a huge all-encompassing grip on you. I mean, geez, the strength to be able to turn away from that and the wisdom, man, I bet you whatever's at the core of that could help people in other parts of their lives, right?
For sure.
So it's the same thing, you guys, whatever you've learned and been drilled in your head that you take for granted is just normal. It's like, I don't know what those words mean, but I find them fascinating. And that's why when you use that, I'm like, what does that mean? I want to know about that,
Raj. So what about
Roger that.
in
That's
the
my least
civilian
favorite
sense?
words.
Yeah.
Roger that.
Roger that.
So in the civilian sense, at least before I got in the military, ASAP meant, when you can.
Right.
Get to it. That does not mean the same thing in the military. That means, why isn't it done?
Right.
Like right fucking now.
That's
right?
that's how I mean it.
Good.
And I appreciate that meaning. Yeah. It's what it should mean.
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
No, not like that. And then another good one is when if Scott and I are having a conversation, especially like if we've got old, like shitty military phones, and he says, gotta go, and hangs up. Like, I don't feel bad and nothing. There's no problem. We'll get back to whatever we had to get to. We could be talking about a very important thing.
Sure.
But if he says, gotta go, and hangs up, something more important just happened.
Yeah.
My civilian friends aren't used to that. So they'll say, oh, shoot, I'm already hanging up on him. Because it's like, it's not time for us to
I
talk
learned a
anymore.
lot of stuff from Steve, too, the way he does personality management in his field. Just watching how he operates. And I've been to concerts with Steve, and he's taking me backstage. We do some cool stuff. It's like, it's fun to be with, have the Hutton VIP pass. But just watching that personality management style is 180 degrees different from how we are allowed to operate in the military, where we can be really curt, really to the point at times. And you are allowed to with certain people. But that's something to learn. Again, when you are willing to learn and pull things from other industries, you're like, that was really effective. The way he phrased that, or the way he couched his opinion on that was, that's an art. And, war isn't a process. War is an art. Everything we do about it. And everything has that fulcrum where, science meets art and vice versa on the other side of the slope. And I don't want to get into a whole geometry here. I don't do math in public, and I shouldn't do geometry because the guy with a 1.24 GPA in high school should never do that in public, which I got Steve beat. I'm guaranteed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. But I think that is really important to, when we're exposed to that. And that's one of the things I've always loved to do, even within the military circles, is snoop around in the other jobs.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you do this when you're out on the road either, but I was next to a mechanized battalion, or which is tanks or the things with tracks, and I'd go over and I'd be like, hey, what do you do? Like, or what is this thing? Or like, what does this button do when I push it? Like, sir, don't touch that. So, do you do that when you're on the road? Do you engage other people? Like, well, hey, what do you do here? Are you engaging? You're a pretty engaging person. So,
well, yeah, I'd like to. I mean, I don't know if I'm like, I think it's got to capture my attention or whatever. But
just
again,
when you think you know everything about the music industry, you meet one guy and you're like, I had no idea that guy even existed.
Yeah, I'm always interested to hear how people do things, for the purpose of trying to improve, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that's curiosity. If you're super satisfied with everything, are you going to still be curious? You know?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe some people are.
We're always talking about improvement.
Yeah. I mean, I always want to be better than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
And, again, that's I don't think everyone shares that philosophy, but
so who are the next great artists that you're managing right now that everyone should be looking out for? What do you want to talk about?
Well, again, I keep a pretty lean roster at the moment. I'm finding that as I get older, keep things a little more simple and put my time and attention into one or two things, and I have better results than in the past. But, again, right now, my primary focus as far as acts is too many zoos. I have writers and producers. Plugging them won't really help them, because that's a behind the scenes thing. But I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at a bunch of different things right now.
Always keeping them secrets.
Yeah. Couple.
No, I'm not trying to be coy. I'm looking at different artists and thinking about whether I should get involved or not, and try to make a calculated decision on if it's worth the time investment. Sure. But I have a new business partner, and we're rebranded the company from Uppercut to Impossible Management. And, I always like to sort of surround myself with people that are really intelligent and high functioning. And his name's Griff Morris, and he helped run Amazon Music for the last 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And before that, he helped run the Grammys and Music Cares. So he's a incredibly accomplished guy, and it's really a huge
guy. He's a big dude. Griff, what's up, man? You're a monster. Yeah.
But it's nice to be in business with him, and he brings his own very unique skills and experience to the table. And, we're working with some acts together, and he has a guy by the name of Hayes Carl that's had a #1 song in Americana for 12 weeks and is doing real well and enjoying a nice big uptick in his career. And we have a guy by the name of Bob Schneider who's had a long career out of Texas, and we're working with Bob, and that's off to a good start. And we're just kind of figuring out what maybe one or two other things to add to the mix. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on with us.
Yeah, you're welcome.